Welcome in everyone to episode 39 of Bruins Tape to Tape. I'm your host tonight, Maria from Watertown. I'm going to welcome in shortly my ever fabulous co-host Karoline, and that video clip is sadly the one and only goal scored by Pavel Zacha during the course of the playoffs, and unfortunately it was not enough in Game 6 against the Florida Panthers to help the Bruins extend the series to Game 7. We will be talking about that game more specifically. We're also going to talk about some of the comments made on Breakup Day by members of the Boston Bruins, as well as the annual season-ending press conference by Bruins management. But before we get into all of those topics, welcome in, Karoline.
Hi,
It's a
Maria.
little bit of a somber episode tonight.
It is. It is. And watching that goal, I mean, it was a beautiful goal, but it was also a sad goal because that was the last goal that we got to see scored until October, really. So I will sit here sadly with my summertime cold, watching other teams move on to the Eastern Conference final and Stanley Cup.
Well, I appreciate you coming off injured reserve tonight to wrap up what I feel has been a good year, not only for the Bruins but for us as a duo, just experimenting with the idea of two women who love hockey and talking hockey and putting our thoughts and comments out for the universe to listen to. So I also want to thank our listeners. We do have a very, very nice following, and we really appreciate the support and the encouragement from everyone that has been championing us throughout our inaugural season. So this won't be the last for this season, folks, because we do plan on recording a couple of special episodes. One will be on or about June 18th. We'll be talking about the construction of this team, the Boston Bruins, moving forward, what we'd like to see, who we'd like to see potentially stay, who we'd like to see potentially go. We won't be doing that in tonight's episode. And then we will have another special episode as free agency hits in July, because based on the comments made by Bruins management today, we do expect them to be active during free agency, as will many other teams. So there should be a lot of good news to be talking about as we approach free agency.
Absolutely.
So, but let's start with the not so great news, in that again, for the second year, the Bruins have been eliminated by the Florida freaking Panthers. God, do I dislike that team. I just dislike that team.
Yeah. And we've talked about this. It's not just that we've played them a whole host of times. I mean, they've been in the division for quite a few years. It's not just that level of frequency. What is that? Familiarity breeds contempt. It's just being in a position where, your team has worked tremendously hard, played the game the right way, and lost once again to a team that honestly doesn't play in the most honorable of ways. The Bruins were by no means perfect, and we've talked about all of their shortcomings, but it still kind of sticks in your craw when this kind of thing happens, when it's almost like an injustice, not because of anything specific. I mean, there are specific things, but it stinks when it's a team like that. And I will say it wasn't quite as much of a heartbreaker this year, at least. I was afraid that it was going to be. but it sucks nonetheless, right?
Yeah, and I agree with all that you've said. The one thing that I will give the Florida Panthers credit for, they are friggin' relentless.
Yeah.
And I think if, the Bruins had spurts of that relentlessness, we might
Mhm.
be having a different conversation at this point in time. But
Mhm.
that second period by the Florida Panthers, the building itself, I was at the game,
Mhm.
and as loud and crazy and frenetic as the first period was when Zaka scored that goal,
Yeah.
you could just hear the building erupt. But when the Panthers came out in the second period and were just pressing and pressing and spending so much time in the
Mhm.
Bruins end, I think there were enough fans in the building who were saying to themselves, here we go,
Yep.
here we go, wait for it, wait for it, Florida's going to score, wait for it. And there was just a level of quiet concern because you could see the writing on the wall that
Yep.
eventually
Yeah.
Florida was going to tie that game because once again, the Bruins had their opportunities to extend the lead and they just couldn't finish.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
I don't know about you, but I'm frankly tired of saying that time and time again in the
Yeah.
playoffs with
Yep.
Boston Bruins.
Yeah. So I have I guess it's a funny, but not like a funny haha, like a funny ongoing joke with my dad where we will often say at the end of the season or as we get closer to the end of the season, all right, if the Bruins don't go all the way, what's going to be the epitaph on their tombstone for this season at the end of the day? And in previous years, it was here lives the 2022 Boston Bruins. They couldn't clear the puck, right? This
Oh,
year, and it wasn't on the epitaph last year, but it's not the first time it's been there. The 2023-2024 Boston Bruins, they just couldn't finish. There's a lot of times I think as the optimist, I like to say, man, it's really just bad puck luck. But this kind of went beyond because it was a level of bad luck that no longer you can't just say like, "Oh, that's just bad luck." Like, why does that keep happening? It's the same thing over and over again, right? It's how many breakaways did they have in this series because, you know, Florida's relentless approach at throwing pucks on net would often result in the odd man rush
correct.
in Boston's favor,
Correct.
going up the other way, and they'd either have the odd man rush with 2-on-1, or they would have just one guy, and every single one of them, except for finally Pavel Zacha in the last game, like none of them could convert. That's more than bad luck, right? For it to happen at least 5 times in a series, 3 at least in a single game. So, sadly, this year's epitaph, they just couldn't finish.
And you know what? This team or whoever the makeup of the team will be in the fall, which we
Mhm.
do expect it to be different.
Yep.
They need to friggin' figure out how to win at home because
Yeah.
this the Boston Garden should be a house of horrors or the TD Garden. It really, really should.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't understand why it is that these players start pressing to the degree in which they press at home.
Mhm. Yeah,
And it's not a small sample size any longer.
in the presser today, I think it was Cam who had mentioned
Cam.
this, and this wasn't the
Yes.
first time that I've heard this. I think I heard it on an episode of 32 Thoughts, where the notion of the home ice advantage, which, like, it's not just a gut feeling, like it's actually measurable in statistics. It seems to be disappearing, and Cam even had, thrown a number out there. I did not go confirm. Like I said, I was laying on my couch today because so I was not going to be going and looking that up, but that he said that all teams across the league actually had a sub 500 record at home. And there have been a lot of theories about why. I think the one that I heard on 32 Thoughts or somewhere else, it was, well, all these arenas look exactly the same, that the ice is the rink itself is built the same way, and they have all the same standards, and there's none of that individual character that you would have had at, like, the Boston Garden versus Madison Square Garden versus, wherever. And to some degree, yes, but I also do think that playing at home wasn't just because you had the advantage of maybe a rink that was a little bit different, because, I mean, it's been a long time where pro teams have been practicing not at the rink. So, physically being used to this particular rink area, like, they don't have tons of time there, right? They're practicing at Warrior, they're practicing, at whatever, an offsite facility. So I think there's still that kind of intangible piece of playing at home that should still give the home team the advantage. The energy, the crowd, like, we all know when we watch a hockey game, when it is loud, no matter if you're at a college game, a pro game, whatever, when the crowd gets into it and it is deafening, it absolutely impacts the game on the ice, and the fans at TD Garden are just as enthusiastic and loud and excited to be there this year as they have ever been. So it's not that. So I don't know what to make of that particular record. I mean, the home advantage for playoffs makes no sense.
I still have a hard time buying it because they put so much emphasis on having home ice advantage,
right?
Particularly for matchup purposes,
right? So, but then why? But if this is happening to all teams across the league, it's weird, right? Like, I don't doubt that it's happening. I've heard it enough times at this point. I mean, I can certainly go and look it up, but I have heard it from trusted sources at this point that I feel like I don't have to look that up. So it's a weird thing, and it's
no, and a lot of people,
to say the least,
to it recently. Jim Montgomery spoke about it. Cam Neely spoke about it. Elliot Friedman has spoken about it. So it just boggles the mind. Boggles the mind that it seems to be, I don't want to say a disadvantage at this point, but less of an advantage that one would hope. And, we highlighted the Pavel Zacha goal because we're going to talk about, part of the reason why we feel that we weren't, able to win that game and potentially force a game 7 is the inability to finish, the inability to score. That was Pavel Zacha's first goal in, and again, I didn't look this up. Was it 20 plus playoff games at this juncture?
I think it's his entire career. So yeah, it's astonishing. And he's 27, so he's been in the league for what, probably a decade. Let me see, his draft year was 2015. So, like, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
And the goal that ended the Bruins season, or hopes of extending the series to a game 7, was, just atypical of the struggles that we saw with this team all season long. I will say that this was one of the few mistakes that Jeremy Swayman made, was that rebound that came off the initial shot was not redirected, probably where he wanted it to, but you know what? I'm not putting it on him. I'm not putting it on him. It was one of the few flippin' mistakes he made. It was an unfortunate time with what, a minute 30 left on the clock.
That what happened with him, because he also then couldn't see the puck. That I would chalk up to the hockey gods. In his case, because of how good he was all season, that was just, that alone, I think, was bad luck just for him, not anybody else on the ice in front of him. Because, you know, they had jobs to do as well, that they did not do. And they were not, you know, they weren't successful in regaining possession or deflecting it themselves better. He's the only one that gets the hockey gods pass on that. He earned that.
Yeah, and it just seemed to me that, Parker Wotherspoon and Morgan Geeky just were like looking at each other like, you got this, like just so, frustrating to have lost in that manner.
Yeah.
But not unsurprising in light of the fact that those were struggles that we saw over and over again for this Boston Bruins team.
Yeah.
Now, all in all, I would say they had a successful season. My expectation was, once I saw the construct of this team and how they were playing and the fact that they were a good hockey team all season long, I wanted them to get out of the first round of the playoffs. They needed to show me, this coach needed to show me that he could get this team out of the first round of the playoffs. And they did that. Now, having said that, when you then get to the next round and you see that, there's an opportunity, there's potential, if you play to your strengths, that you can give another team a series and possibly force a game 7. Was I disappointed? Yes, I was.
Sure.
Yes, I was. Because when you think back to the other games in this series, coulda, woulda, I guess, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Could they have forced 7 games? They might have been able to do so.
Yeah. I mean, you always look back and you kind of wonder if this one moment changed. We did that a lot last year when it came down to Monty's coaching decisions during the series last year, and like, he really should have changed out goalies at, what was it, game 5 or whenever it was now. I try not to remember that series. This year, I think, for the most part, I think he did a good job. I will give him, if we're doing pass fail, he passed. I think he made a couple of questionable choices over the 2 rounds, but on the whole, I don't know that anything that he did, I would have said, like, man, he really shouldn't have done that. That screwed everything up. I think ultimately what changed the game, and the whole series rather, was game 4 in Boston and the whole goaltender interference debacle. Now, I'm not saying that Boston would have won that game. We don't know. But that is a moment that completely changed, I think, the direction of this series. I think maybe, because I think, first of all, Boston scored first in that game. When they've scored first, they have a tendency to win. They were playing very well that night, and I think they had a more than fair chance at winning that game. And if that situation didn't happen, and they had won that game, I think we would have at least gotten to a game 7. And then who knows? Like, again, I don't know. Based on how everything was happening after game 1, I mean, if the team that showed up at game 1 was the same team that showed up at least 1 or 2 more times, I would have stood by my prediction of, yeah, the Bruins can beat them. Look at how they've played in game 1. But that we never saw that team again. They didn't come back. So we were left with a team that, like, they did okay. They didn't, especially in game 6, I think there was a lot of really good, healthy debate in our Discord about the quality of that game for Boston. I would have probably given them like a B-. And I think they were lucky to make it through that game with that B-, because I don't think that Florida played particularly well. I think Florida played at a B, and they just happened to win. I don't think either team looked dominant in the game. They had their moments, like you said, Florida had come in the second period with energy. Like, that's what you do in a normal game, but they didn't come in and like eviscerate Boston, So I think that's the other thing that was a little bit dissatisfying with the way that this series ended for me, was it didn't seem decisive. Like, that wasn't a decisive victory for Florida over Boston, right? They didn't come in and they didn't crush Boston. And Boston didn't just roll over and die. So that's kind of what I found it to be, just like, they just went out with a whimper, I guess. Yeah, disappointing to say the least, because obviously you always want to see your team keep going. But on the whole, I think my hope at the start of the year was, let's just get a wild card spot. Totally happy with it. Somehow we managed to have a team that bounced back and forth between first and second place, not just in the conference, but in the league somehow. Not in any sort of, again, decisive, definitive way. Just they somehow fell into it. And I think that's really how I would describe that whole season. Really, it was bizarre, and they kind of just fell into these good opportunities, and sometimes they took advantage of it, sometimes they didn't. But we crushed the hopes and dreams of the Toronto faithful for yet another year, and
which led to the coach being fired. But
breaking news this afternoon was hired in New Jersey. So
Sheldon, nobody recycles coaches better than the NHL.
Yeah, right.
It's unbelievable. You got Lindy Ruff going back to Buffalo. Sheldon Keefe winds up with the Devils. Craig Berube is now the coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's where's Claude Julien?
I don't know. My God. So I'm happy. I'm happy on the whole. It's just kind of hard to be like super ecstatic because of the blah way that everything kind of petered out. So,
well, this leads into the breakup day and the season-ending presser, because there are things that I think we all saw with this Bruins team this year that we all know there need to be some changes made. The team needs, you need some higher end elite, more elite talent. I don't want to say, and I'm not going to say that this team is not talented.
Yeah.
But they're having talented players playing in roles that they shouldn't be playing in.
Yeah.
And I'm specifically talking about, the Pavel Zakas, the Charlie Coyles. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. Jake, David Krejci needs, I'm sorry, David Pastrnak, I'm thinking back, David
Yeah.
Pastrnak needs
Yeah.
a supporting cast that is more than Morgan Geekie or Pavel Zacha or
Yeah.
Charlie Coyle. I'm sorry. People can say he disappears in the playoffs, and the statistics bear that. But what you forget about is if you only have basically one or two guys that
They're
a
easy to
team
cover.
needs to focus on, and you take them out of the game,
Yeah.
well, what
You have
do you
nothing
think
left.
is going to
Yeah.
happen? You
Yeah.
don't have much else left in the well.
Right. And it's one thing, yes, Boston had excellent depth scoring, down the line. Fine. Yes. We're also not saying that there was no other scoring. However, what Boston struggled with was situations where they would have benefited from having basically two David Pasternaks on the ice because the teams then could not neutralize both of them, right?
Correct.
Maybe, here's a wild thought, maybe their special teams power play stinks because you have one guy out there on one unit for 2 minutes. Like, imagine if we had a power play. Let's say we had two David Pasternaks, and you really wanted to make a point of executing on this upcoming power play because it's going to be crucial for the game. Oh, I don't know. Have two of them on that same power play unit at the same time. Can you imagine? Like, then I think our power play wouldn't be a problem. Or to have one on each unit and then you are cycling essentially the same person out there, but the other one's getting rest. Like, they need some of that. And it can't be, I'm not saying, we want to see an actual like copy paste, because I feel in instances where I've seen that in other teams across the league, it creates a kind of divide in the team. And I don't mean like quite literally, although in some cases it does. I do mean that, where it's like an us versus them and that there's no meshing of the team. Like, I don't know enough about Edmonton to know if that's kind of what that situation is out there. But like, as an outside observer, when I look at Edmonton, I see McDavid and Draisaitl and everybody else. And it doesn't seem to me like they don't appear to me to be a cohesive team. It's those two guys and the other guys, and the others can kind of come and go, and it might not really matter and whatever, right? Same thing in Toronto, right? You've got three guys. It's the three of them and everybody else. And it's there's no cohesion. I've said this before. I think that Don Sweeney needs to take a good hard look at what they've done down in New York, because I think that the Rangers have actually done a phenomenal job with developing an elite core of players who fulfill different kinds of roles and positions on the team and are therefore very integrated with the rest of the team. I don't look at New York and think of those five guys, Panarin, Zibanejad, I'm sick. I can't remember the rest of them. I'm going to watch them in a few minutes.
No.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
yep.
And I think actually I probably could not name them all off the top of my head when I'm not sick, because like, when I look at the Rangers, I don't think of those core guys and the rest of the team. So you've got to find a way to build a team that has those elite players who can perform in different ways, who are well integrated, throughout, right? A mix of forwards and defensemen, right? Adam Fox, that's one, of course. I can't forget him because everybody compares Chucky and him. So
Trouba,
Brian
Lindgren. I know what you think of him. Say what you will,
but and I kind of actually, the funny thing is, and I know someone's probably going to be yelling this at the screen when they hear me start saying this, because a year ago when we were saying like, oh, who's going to be the captain, and there was a whole discussion of like there shouldn't be a captain. A couple of years ago, that's exactly what the Rangers did, and they had those 5 guys all wore A's. And then, of course, there was a captain was eventually named, and those are the 5 guys who are that core who have integrated so well. And you kind of wonder, was it them all being A's that made them and this team this way, or were they just made A's because they were already like that and already doing that for their team? So, like, I think Don should take a look at what they've done down there, because I think what they've got is really special and something that other teams who are looking to, get an advantage in their divisions should look at. And I think Boston should definitely look at them and not this 2-player model, because I don't care for it, and I don't think it's on brand for Boston either, quite frankly.
No, and I don't think it's sustainable in the league.
No,
in the league, particularly with the level of parity that we've seen throughout the course of this season. And we do need to give Don Sweeney a little bit of credit, because as we all know,
I'm not used to that still.
I know, and I'm not either. Trust me. But they went all in last year because they were having the most historic season in the history of the league. So he did what was necessary to give the team all of the weapons that were needed. Now, did that come with a penance of sort? Yes. And you paid that penance this year because you were handcuffed with what you could do.
Yeah.
Now we're heading into a new year. So now Dawn, Cam, Charlie,
they've been handed Dad's credit card.
Okay.
So wild.
You're going to have money now to spend, right? Yes. You're going to have some money to spend. You presumably have seen what it takes to be a playoff Stanley Cup contending team, i.e., look at the New York Rangers, look at the Florida Panthers. Yep. I'm not really paying attention to what's going on in the Western Conference, but my understanding and what I read and hear is that Dallas Star team is as advanced as you can get with pretty much 4 solid lines up and down their roster.
And phenomenal goaltending.
And good. Right. Yes, very, very good goaltending. So let's see how they map out the plan to improve on their deficiencies that we all saw and it just wasn't in the playoffs. We knew they had deficiencies to start the season. However, they weren't in a position to address them financially.
Right. And remember also, it wasn't just that last year's cap only went up by a penny. The Bruins also had to pay, quite literally, penalties because of the bonuses that they were obligated to pay out for Bergeron and Krejci. So they were extra behind the 8 ball when it came to finances. So they're really going to be feeling rich this off season for sure.
So that leads us nicely into. So to wrap up this segment, folks, as if you don't already know, because it seems like a lifetime ago that this game happened, and it was just last Friday, and we're recording on May 22nd. The Bruins lost 2-1 and had the, unfortunate episode of yet another goodbye handshake on home ice for the Florida Panthers to move on to face the New York Rangers. That series is beginning tonight in New York, and all I can say is go Rangers. Go Rangers.
I know. Now go take a shower.
I will. After we're done, I'll wash my mouth out with soap.
And not just because it's 90 degrees today. Yep. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting off season. You know, the presser today, love-hate relationship with this presser because, you know, is there going to be anything actually new or interesting that's going to be said? Maybe, maybe not. Last year was actually a little surprisingly dramatic, because there was a lot of drama that was kind of covertly getting sent out in that one. But this year, you know, I think a couple of things. One, I was really glad to hear that nobody's heading off to surgery. For as much as anyone can debate on whether knowing that some players had physical ailments or not, you know, makes them feel better, makes them not feel better. You know, I think you probably doesn't make you feel any better.
No. And honestly, I'm getting a little tired of the, this guy has this guy has that, this guy. Okay.
Yeah. But on the whole, glad to hear that nobody's slated for any surgery. So
that is going to keep them out for any extended period
of time. 2 years because in a row.
That has happened in the past.
Yep.
That to keep players, you know, i.e. Brad Marchand 1 year with the hips. Grizzly
that was all the same year.
That was all the same.
That was all the same year. So
all in the same season.
Yeah.
Or end of season.
So glad to hear that. Otherwise, there were no particular surprises. You know, Cam talked about really needing a team of guys who can go after pucks, which we already knew that. Some speed, which they've been slowly building and growing on their speed. This year was probably the fastest team that Boston has had in quite a while, with like Lauko and JD's really fast. A couple of the other younger new guys. So what happens beyond that? We're just going to have to wait, because I just don't understand why anybody even asks, like, can you tell us the conversations that you're having with these people? It's like, are you kidding me? No, he cannot tell you what he just said to Jake DeBrusk. Like, you have to wait for the
I can appreciate asking the question, but of course, there's not going to be a response, any great detail. I mean, Don Sweeney did acknowledge, with respect to the players that he brought in at the deadline, that it seems, if you read between the lines, that he's had conversations with them.
Yep.
And they probably know what direction the organization is heading in with respect to whether they'll be staying or not as a future member of the Boston Bruins. Now, he did say, interestingly enough, was it him or Cam Neely, with regard to Pat Maroon, that would be dependent on his health. And I will say that I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that you got the best of Pat Maroon, or the best he had to give, with coming back from back surgery. So I too, I think, would like to leave the door open for bringing back Pat Maroon for another year on short money, because I think there are components to a player like that have value to them, especially with some of the younger players on the team.
And not just, you know, again, those off ice things that someone like him brings for those younger players, but quite frankly, even on the ice. I mean, I certainly noticed when he was playing, because of his reputation and obviously what he still will say and is willing to tango with anyone out there on the ice, that people were cautious and thoughtful when it came to, am I going to drop the gloves right now? Because that guy's right over there and I don't want to have anything to do with that. So, he's kind of reached this level in his enforcer-ness where everybody knows what he can do, that he will still do it, and better than to engage him in it. So he's still an enforcer to some degree because he's preventing these things from happening. He's preventing shenanigans just by his sheer presence, and I think that's fine too. You don't have to just be out there swinging punches to be the enforcer. Like, if you have the reputation and then that alone is what stops it, fine. I'm okay with that.
He comes with some cachet.
Yeah.
That has value to it. What that value is up to,
right,
Sweeney and Maroon's agent to decide. But I wouldn't be upset having him for another year at the right salary, because you have priorities, right? That we haven't talked about the big elephant in the room as of yet. Two gigantic elephants. And honestly, I don't know how Cam Neely will implement his plan of getting faster and wanting more players that win 50-50 battles if you can't figure out where you're going with your goaltending tandem and where you're going with Jake DeBrusk. And those are two big pieces. There wasn't a lot of any significance that came out of this season-ending press conference. Yes, we know Charlie said, right, everyone's keeping their jobs. Neely's not getting fired, Sweeney's not getting fired, and Montgomery's not getting fired.
Right.
Interestingly enough, when Montgomery was asked about other coaching staff changes, there wasn't a real direct response to that. And I, for one, whoever constructs and works with the power play unit, pack your bag, get out, because you suck. Okay.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I mean, when it comes to the goalies, I'm sure what Don was trying to say, or it was, we're open to anything and everything. Interestingly enough, for whatever reason, my interpretation of that was not what I think he was trying to go for. For me, it was more of a, we want to keep them both if we can. But ultimately, it really sounded, and I could be very wrong, but this was just my initial take, was that unless Linus says, I'll go, they might not actually be able to afford to keep Jeremy. Like, that's ultimately what the situation is. Everybody, I hear all the talking heads going on and on about, well, they're going to trade Linus. They're going to trade Linus. You don't know that unless there's something that you're not saying. But at the end of the day, if Linus says no, he's got a 16-team no trade. If he says
and
no,
it drops to 15 on July 1, but that's still
literally
half the league.
That's half the league. And he still has to then, well, I mean, whatever, like, he has to still be amenable to it. And he kind of controls the situation moving forward. And I don't know, maybe it was because what I didn't hear Don say was, no question, we're going to keep the band together, right? Not that I think he would have, but still, because he didn't, and knowing that situation, I don't know, I kind of interpreted it as, we'll see if we can afford Jeremy.
Oh, see, now I'm looking at this a little bit differently based on
Yeah.
Donnie's comments, because I'm
Mhm.
looking at, some tweets that were put out by some of the regular guys that, and guys and gals that we read and listen to that
Yeah.
cover the team. And this is from Ty Anderson, where, he asked, so I think Ty asked a direct question about tying up some potentially significant amounts of money
Yeah.
into goaltenders,
Yep.
because, Jeremy Swayman is going to be due a significant salary. You're looking at a guy who, his salary should double based
Oh,
on what he did in the playoffs.
easily. He's looking
So
at
7 to 8
6 million at
million.
least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Maybe
Yeah.
maybe higher than that. And
Yeah.
based on
Yeah.
some of the things that I've read,
Yeah.
maybe in the $7 million. So you're talking about potentially tying up over $12 million just on your goalies.
Right. That's
And
half your budget.
that's right.
You've got
And when
30 to
you
play
have
with.
some other
Right.
priority needs, right,
Yeah.
at this point in the season.
Right.
So, Donnie gave the impression that he wanted to keep the tandem together, but he put this message out of he expects the phone to ring on Ulmark. So that to me is like a bat signal to the other teams. Call me, because I'm going to listen to what you have to say.
Right.
And he may need to not only convince Linus that this might be in his best interests
Mm-hmm.
to go to another team where he will be the big dog, and they might need to potentially lose the trade. I don't know if it's, not getting full value or having maybe to eat some of the money. That's how I interpret it, because I don't see how in the real world you can keep both of these guys, because the last thing, honestly, that I think they want to have happen is, number one, have Swayman potentially take them back to arbitration again.
Yeah.
Now they have a little bit of control over him because he's a restricted free agent, but I don't think you want to go down that road again. And my God,
and I don't think they will.
No, but what a debacle it would be after the performance that this kid gave you in the playoffs to show you, I can do this. I can be your guy. I want to be your guy here for a very long time. You cannot let this guy walk. You just can't. That's just my view of the situation.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting, of course. And we, as like Maria said, should something happen in the month of June in terms of trades, we will definitely have a special episode, especially if there is a trade involving Linus Ullmark.
Linus doesn't sound like a guy who really wants to leave town.
You don't want to go either.
No. And folks, if you haven't heard some of his comments, it's very easy to Google or, go to 98.5 and read, articles written by Ty Anderson or WEEI, articles written by Scott McLaughlin.
Has no intention of leaving.
He wants to stay here. He wants to stay here. And he was very clear about the fact there's a reason why there are certain teams on his no movement clause, whether it be for, professional reasons, personal reasons, a combination of both. So that will be an interesting scenario. And Jake DeBrusk and where that lands, because based on what Don Sweeney said today, folks, they've taken an aggressive approach to Jake DeBrusk, which sounds like maybe there was an offer of some sort made. But Sweeney also followed that up by saying negotiations are a two-way street.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I found
So,
that to be a little interesting.
yeah. It'll be
You know
curious.
how I feel about Jake?
You could take him or leave him.
I could take him or
You
leave
want to
him.
leave him.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I want to leave him and Matt Grislick at this point in time. So
Yeah. So it's going to be curious to see what goes down with Jake, because it reminds me actually a little bit also of last year's situation with Bert. If the negotiation, some of that hardball negotiation that maybe is happening from the agent, which, we all saw how Bert's agent kind of screwed up on that one.
misjudge the market.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if this agent does the same or not. I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting, of course. Any other final thoughts that you have?
Yeah, my final thought, which I think, we glossed over it, and I want to get your take on it before we move on. But we typically do our stick taps and penalty box, and that final game, there weren't a lot of stick taps because they lost game 6, right? You only score 1 goal.
Yep.
And when you're struggling to score goals, there's not really a lot to applaud you for, other than, Jeremy Swayman, who was just the brightest star throughout this playoff run, and frankly for the entirety of the playoffs until the Bruins got eliminated. The best player in the playoffs until that moment in time. But the penalty box for me is, once again, the Bruins had another too many men on the ice penalty in that game. And I'm dumbfounded. And I'm just, they're so lucky that they didn't give up any goals during those. But, at this point, I've waxed and waned about, is it the players? Is it the coach? It's all of them. Jesus Christ.
It's everything.
And again, apropos to how that series played out with the, mental mistakes as well as the inability to capitalize. So clearly a lot of work that needs to be done, both from a coaching standpoint still, I think, and from a player standpoint.
Yeah. I think the slogan of the second round was, "Are you kidding me?"
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I said that multiple times every night. Are you kidding me?
Bright spots though.
Yes.
Was again Jeremy Swayman. I think Mason Lohrei. There's a lot of potential.
Phenomenal.
There is a lot of potential there, and I think we all knew that to start the season, and had hoped that maybe he'd get the opportunity to grow and develop in the regular season. But now I think it's time for the Bruins, to cut ties with the likes of the Derek Forberts and the Matt Grislicks, and maybe even the Kevin Shattenkirks. I mean, you've got to see what you have in players like Lohrei, like Beecher, like Matt Poitras. Even even Justin Brazeau, who showed you that there's potential, potential there. Boquist, potential there. There are roles that, if you put these players in the right roles, if being the caveat word with the Boston Bruins moving forward, the right roles, Donnie.
Yeah. And that's ultimately where Jim Montgomery has to make sure that he doesn't fumble, because one of the things that Don, I think, said in the presser was, they were honestly surprised by a lot of their rookies. And yes, those guys will have to, they're not guaranteed a spot, but they were surprised, and they have to consider those guys moving forward. And it's going to be up to the coaching staff to make sure that those players are in those right roles and are being developed appropriately. You know, whatever happened with Mason Lowry from regular season to postseason, I mean, that was like a switch got flipped, because like he wasn't bad during regular season, but my God, did he make us nervous, and he made a lot of silly kid mistakes.
Correct.
He
Right.
like blossomed overnight when it came to
He
the
got
playoffs.
better with each game. He got
It
more
was
confident.
unreal. And it wasn't just because, oh, he was now playing every single night, because he had stretches like that during the regular season where he was covering for guys for multiple games. So, you know, figure out how to capitalize that and keep that momentum going into the new season. You know, with Beecher, he's an interesting one to me, because I guess, you know, we've heard not just on other podcasts that we listen to, but in the news media and we see it in how he gets sent down, that there are things about John Beecher that are not meeting expectations of the coaching staff. It's not quite as obvious to me, only I think because his number one asset is his face-off performance. So I would really hope that the coaching staff would see him, see what he can bring when it comes to that, and how can we help support and develop him in whatever those other areas are that they find lacking. Because like face-off champions like that, they are not common. So if you have a guy who's like really, really good at it, and maybe he's not so great at other things, then you need to figure it out. You need to figure out how to get him better at those other things, because there's only so much that you can teach when it comes to that face-off dot, right? Otherwise, I think, quite frankly, a lot of it is just your own natural talent and ability to do that job. So
you need to focus on having that once again be a source of strength for your team, because, you know, we talked about that throughout the course of the season. There were spurts of it being really, really good, but when it was bad, it was really, really bad.
Yeah.
And it's really hard, I think, to generate any momentum one way or the other, either coming out of your own end or putting offensive pressure on, when you don't win the faceoffs and you can't control the puck. Now, it's not solely on the centerman. We saw instances where wingers weren't being as supportive, and maybe that's some of what Cam is referring to when he talks about guys winning more puck battles. So, you know, I'm hoping that they're doing their due diligence and going up and down that roster and saying, you know, these are the guys that we know have it in them. With the right people around them, we can get there, and then identifying who those right people may potentially be, either via free agency or via a hockey trade. Because you got nothing coming out of the draft. It's not even worthwhile to even pay any attention to the NHL draft this year if you're a Boston Bruins fan.
No. Indeed. But with that, it's time to start watching the third round.
Rangers, go Rangers!
Oh! But we'll be back. It's been a heck of a season. I've had a lot of fun with everybody. Thank you, Maria. Hopefully, everyone will enjoy their summer and join us in the Discord. Keep an eye on our social media postings, because we'll post updates on things that are happening in the league, and if we're going to have maybe any special guests this summer or other fun
we might
surprises.
Have one if I can connect with him in the off season. So stay tuned. Stay
follow
tuned,
us.
folks.
Exactly. Like, subscribe, make sure you do that so you can get the notification when our summer episodes pop up. But otherwise, we'll be chatting again when we chat free agency in like a month.
So until then, go out and have yourself some summer fun. Get out on the golf
Yeah.
course, get to your summer homes, get to the beach, however you want to enjoy the downtime that we all deserve after a long season.
Absolutely. Well, as always, go bees.
Go bees.